So before we go out, let's have a look at some of the different maps that we use. There's a variety of scales available to us. The 1 to 50,000 is the commonly used one in UK when people are walking. The 1 to 40,000 is a Harvey map, and that's done of all the national parks and a few other areas. It's a lovely map with a lot of colour on it as well to help illustrate the terrain. Then we've got the 1 to 25,000, which is an OS map again, and then down onto the orienteering maps. They vary in scale from sort of 1 to 5,000, 1 to 10,000, maybe 1 to 15,000, and they have more detail on. So as we go through those, 1 to 50,000 has the least detail on, and at the bottom end there, the orienteering maps have the most detail on. On the 1 to 50, 1 to 40 and 1 to 25,000, they have grid squares on them, and those grid squares, it's always 1 kilometre directly across them, about 1.5 kilometres if you go diagonally across them. The orienteering maps don't have those on. If you are a keen Munro walker, to cover all the Munros of Scotland, 284 or so, you're going to need about 35 1 to 50,000 maps. If you try and do that with the 1 to 25,000 maps, you need about 130 of them. So there's big differences that the scales make to the cost of all the mapping that you'll have. Today, of course, a lot of people use digital mapping, and you can just get that straight off your computer, and you can rescale it as well. But the information, for instance, if you rescale a 1 to 50,000 map to come out at a 1 to 25,000 scale, it'll still only have the information that a 1 to 50,000 map has on it. So let's look at the 1 to 50,000 map. That's probably the most commonly bought map. It covers about 40 square kilometres. Each square is 2 centimetres across, that's the kilometre on the ground, and therefore actually 2 millimetres makes 100 metres. So you can measure reasonably accurately on it. If you're doing a long distance journey, maybe multi-day, then 1 to 50,000 map is definitely the one to have. You can carry less mapping, and it's therefore actually slightly cheaper as well because it's got so much on such a large area on it. So now we can look at the 1 to 25, covers half the area of the 1 to 50, and you've now got 4 centimetres across a square, making a kilometre on the ground. So again, it's 4 millimetres is 100 metres. You'll find things like forest rides or fire breaks. You'll find more paths on it. The contour information can be a little more difficult to read than the 1 to 50,000, but it's a popular, if you've got a regular area that you go into, then a 1 to 25 is quite useful because it just has all that more detail on it. Okay, so now we'll look at the Harvey map. That's a 1 to 40,000 scale and fits between the 1 to 50 and the 1 to 25, but it's slightly awkward because it's 2.5 centimetres across a square, so it's not really a round figure, but remember that still across a square is 1 kilometre. The contour interval on it is 15 metres. That too makes calculations for speed and height gain a little more tricky, because the other two maps, it's 10 metres between the contour lines. So the Harvey map uses colour shading to indicate altitude. That's quite useful if you're comparing it against an avalanche forecast or a weather forecast, for instance. The Harvey map of Skye is very well used. It's probably the most popular scale for the Skye Coolin Ridge, and that's an example of a mapped area of the Harvey map that's not a national park. The information on it is very similar to the 1 to 25 because actually it's got the forest rides on and fences and a lot of smaller footpaths that just aren't on the 1 to 50,000. So in summary, I think the Harvey map is a wonderful addition to our range of choice we have in the UK. So looking at orienteering maps, they're not really widely available unless you participate in the sport. There are quite a number of forests that have permanent courses out, and you can buy the maps from the local tourist office. But in terms of teaching people to navigate, they are a fantastic resource, and it makes sense to start at that scale and build up to the other scales. As you go up the scales, you lose information. So for a beginner, they need to build confidence, and you do that by everything that they can see around them being on the map. So we've looked at our different scale of maps, and if you go overseas you'll find other scales as well. They all have advantages and disadvantages, but the one thing that connects all of them is the ability to navigate, and learning to navigate or teaching the skills of navigation, then they do provide quite a useful sequence in terms of scale starting at 1 to 10 and building through to 1 to 50.